All right, Ben, welcome to the Founding AE podcast. I'm super excited to have you on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited as well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. You know, we were talking before about the sort of the founding AE role and what makes it unique, and I want to dig into your experience. But for those that are listening here and maybe don't know you about your background, maybe you can give us a little bit of an intro on yourself, your career path, and how you came to become a founding AE.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm definitely somebody who took like a more windy path, like into tech and into business. So I definitely have one of those like diverse like career paths. So essentially like my career started off, I was actually a school teacher and a golf pro to begin my like out of college, like frankly, I didn't really know what to do. And I thought I could teach. And I'm like, I just kind of just want to get a job out of college. So I did that. I became a teacher for about like 5 or 6 years. So I taught school during the school year, and then I taught golf during the summer. And then eventually, like, I just got really burnt out on it. I was just like, it was a lot of time with kids. It was like, 12 months of the year was kids because during the summer when I taught golf, they were junior camps. And then during the school year, like, I love the teaching part, but just being in education, it's very bureaucratic. And like just even during that time, I was always listening to just like a lot of, as I said before when we were talking, like a huge podcast nerd. So I would listen to like a lot of tech podcasts because the space just seemed like such a like super fascinating space to me. And I would always listen to like Jason Calacanis's This Week in Startups, and a couple other like Harry Stebbings VC podcasts. Like I would listen to these podcasts and I'm like, I really think that I want to wind up in a space. Like people seem very smart, people seem very motivated, people seem super like dedicated to building out this like very cool product. And I mean, I guess I'll also throw this in a little bit too, is that like, so I'm from New York, I'm from the East Coast. And like, I always say this, which is that like on the East Coast, it always feels like kids who are really good in school, like they wind up going into like investment banking or they wind up going into finance. So like tech on the East Coast, I still honestly feel like it's still a little bit like West Coast cool. Like it's just a little bit different. Like you just don't have that exposure. But to me, yeah, it was always a really interesting space. And then eventually, when the pandemic came, man, I just remember like I just remember sitting there. I'm in my apartment. I'm like fighting with kids to like turn their camera on because at that point, like it was the distance teaching, and I'm like, I just don't think I want to do this. And on LinkedIn, there was this whole, it was called the transition teacher movement. So yeah, so like I joined, it was essentially like a virtual job fair, joined one, met the boss at, and this happened like, maybe 4 years ago. I'm still working with the same guy that I met in there, which is pretty cool. Like when I met him, I'm just like, he was very smart. He was very competitive. And to me, it was such a breath of fresh air because that was exactly what I wanted to escape in education. So I moved to an ed tech company. I just did business development for them. Like I'm from Long Island. I'm like, look, I'm like, I can sell. I'm like, if there's one thing I can do, I'm like, and I can contribute to this and where I would fit in, I'm like, it's going to be sales. So, I picked up a BDR role there. Like I remember just never even hearing of the position. Um, and yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that it all kind of ties in. Like I remember when I got that opportunity, I was so excited about it. And I just wanted to prove to like essentially to like the company, to myself, that like I belong like in tech, like I belong to work in tech sales. So like whatever the metrics were that they gave me, I'm like, I'm just gonna try to beat these by like 50%. I'm like, if they want me to do like 50 cold calls in a day, like I'll do 75 or I'll do 100. And if they want me to bring in like this much money on my quota, like I'll bring in like 10x that. And I think that that first job just like laid the foundation for, I would just say, like a sense of urgency that I had, like when it came to sales, like when it came to business. And honestly, it was really cool to be just like rewarded and applauded for working really hard, which like you don't, like you just don't really get in education. Everybody kind of tries to teach teachers, everybody tries to treat teachers more or less the same. And it was just not, it was just a very refreshing feeling to be rewarded. So I was there for a while. That ed tech company, it was like a college and career readiness software. Then I knew that that was just really a stepping stone for, just to leave education entirely. I was just kind of done with the space. I moved to healthcare. I didn't really know, honestly, like a lot about it. Essentially, like, yeah, I really just didn't know that much about it. But I did a couple things. So one thing I did was, and like huge shout out to, there's a Slack community called HealthTechNerds, which is,
Mm.
it's essentially like the way I describe it, it's like a who's who of like health tech. It's one of the most like active groups. I learned so much in healthcare from HealthTechNerds. And I would always go out to, so at the time I was in New York, and I would try to go to as many events as I possibly could. I would keep up to date with Slack. And yeah, I mean, I eventually taught myself more or less like the basics of healthcare, like the typical tech stack, like the problems that happen. And I mean, to me, just like making that jump alone, like a lot of things, even in healthcare, like I could see how people were trying to solve all these problems in healthcare that I didn't even know existed. So to me, like I always just tried to stay as curious as possible as I was trying to learn about all these problems that, like I said, like I had no clue about maybe like 5 months before I learned it. So yeah, went to healthcare, and now, now I'm just currently at Pivotly. This is like my first founding AE role. Pivotly, we essentially like pull siloed data systems into one golden layer of truth. So the clean data can essentially flow everywhere instantly. And I think that for me, like the reason as to why this opportunity was so exciting is, whether I was in education or in healthcare as well, like integrations were just such a problem. Like it was a problem at the health tech company when they were trying to scale. It was a problem in education, hooking up to, they called it like a student information system, like hooking that product up to a student information system. So for me, as I was trying to hunt like a founding AE role that made sense, and I'll get to this a little bit later too. Like it, to me, like if you're going to take on a role like this, you should really you should take on a product that solves a problem that is so painful for a company that like a big company is like, you know what, like we've tried everything. Let's see if this like this team of like six scrappy guys can take care of it for me. So yeah, so I'm at Pivotly right now.
That's awesome. No, I'm always interested in hearing backgrounds of founding AEs because they, believe it or not, they do come from many different backgrounds. There's some commonalities. I think like sports is one that I've seen a lot,
Yeah.
people with sports backgrounds. And I think there's a lot in terms of, that drive and that need to improve and grow that plays well in the founding AE role. The education one is really interesting. I think, just looking at my own experience as a founding AE, I think the teaching, the education part is really valuable as well, right?
Right.
Especially when you're educating the market on a new solution, solving an existing problem. So I can see how those threads probably played in really nicely with your transition into both sales and then founding AE. Now, talking about that leap, right? So it sounds like the first company that you joined was a startup, but it wasn't the founding AE role; it was a BDR role, and then
It
the
was a little
second
bit, it
role,
was probably like, just to give you some context here, it's probably
yeah,
in that like 250 to 500 like
yeah,
employees. Like it was a little bit bigger than a startup at that point. Yeah.
yeah, and then you were in a sales role, and then now you're in your first founding AE role that you mentioned. Was that like a specific decision that you made where you're like, you know what, I've done the sales thing at mid-sized company, I want to get in on the ground floor, or was it something that just happened? And if it was a decision, what kind of drew you to that, and made you feel like, because it's a tough role, right? I mean, and there's a lot of differences, and we can go into that in more detail. But what made you interested in pursuing, the founding AE role rather than just joining another company as a salesperson?
Yeah. I mean, like, so kind of going to, I mean, even when I was at that ed tech company, like I said, like I think that once I got that opportunity to step into tech, like I just put my foot on the gas. I'm like, I was not going to slow down. Like in the back of my head, I'm like, I am just trying to run as far away from the classroom and trying to like that I possibly can. And I'm going to go as fast as I can. And like, I that was a really huge motivator for me. And, I think like, kind of a little bit like I said, is that like when you build that sense of urgency, like showing up to work every day with like a motivation, that I think that it just sort of kind of naturally like brings you down this path of like smaller teams.
Mm,
It's like I think that if you're going to be like an account executive at like a HubSpot or like a Salesforce, I not like, again, it's not that there's like anything like wrong with that. In fact, there's like a ton of things that are great about it, but it's just a whole different vibe. I think like a person like I think if you're trying to operate urgently, and I'm young, like I'm 34, so for me, like this is that also definitely plays a role. Like this is a very good time to like take a risk and see if I can, be part of a team that be employee number 5 of a company that grows to 500. So yeah, so for me, like the timing of like my life, frankly, was one of them. Two, I think that my personality is just sort of built for like my brain is just kind of always going with ideas like how can we make this a little bit quicker, how can we make this a little bit better, and you find out about yourself like a lot very quickly in these roles too. Like it doesn't take long to find out like if you have it or not, if you have the drive or not, or like like to me it's really like that curiosity piece.
mm.
I don't think you could be a founding AE unless you are hyper curious. Like that is the best way I can put it. So yeah, you find out a lot about yourself, and I think that those sort of traits like drew me to this role.
Yeah, makes sense. And if somebody's listening to this and they're where you were in your previous role, thinking about taking that leap and going from a company that maybe has a little bit more resources,
Yeah,
maybe they're at HubSpot or Salesforce, like you said, and
sure.
they've always been curious about that early stage. What are some of the differences? What are some of the things that, like, in your first week, 2 weeks, month, you're like, whoa, this is this is the different ball game, right? What were some of those surprises that you experienced that made you realize, this is different than just a sales role at a larger company?
It's such a good question, because it smacks you in the face pretty quick. Like you land and you're like, all right, it's like this is different. And one of the things is that like if you show up on a sales team, right? Like even take like Zello, that was the name of the first company I was at, and we probably had like 6 or 7 BDRs, and we probably had like 8 AEs or so. Like
Mm,
you're sort of immediately given like, hey, look, like like here's like a library of like great discovery calls and great, cold calls that have worked in the past. And we also have outreach that integrates perfectly to Salesforce. And we
yeah.
have like all of these like, tech tools that like at the time, like I just took for granted. I'm like, oh, this is great. This sets you up so quickly. So I think that when you're in that founding AE role, like you obviously just don't have that. Like you don't have that like endless like the library of discovery calls that have worked before, and you don't have like outreach hooking up to Salesforce perfectly. Like you really have you, and like you're taking a pretty big bet on you. So if I were to like, I mean, the question was like to give advice like to somebody
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You're doing. I mean, you're painting a really clear picture. I think that's part of the purpose here is for
yeah.
people to come in. But yeah, what other differences and also challenges?
Yeah,
Like
those are the
specifically, what
differences.
were the biggest challenges that you experienced as well?
I honestly like for this role, just given like my background of being a school teacher and coming from education and healthcare and like at healthcare, like it wasn't as it was like a little bit of a technical product, but that wasn't like the whole like essence of the product. For me, like learning this whole new tech lingo
Hmm.
has definitely been a challenge, but it's so fun. Like I also just want to say this is that like with every like there's a lot of challenges to this role, but if you're taking on a role like this, like those challenges you should also see as like pretty exciting to learn about something new, because like if you don't view it that way, it's not a good role for you. So like for me, like picking up the lingo in like this brand new space, like honestly, like setting up like your own tech stack and like your own workflow, like you're gonna have a say in that whole like procurement process and that whole like buying process within your company as to, like what would be the best fit for us. Um, and to be honest, like you're always just going to be iterating and you're always going to be changing up, like what you do on cold calls and what you do on discovery calls and how you run your demos and like what's the best place to stop a demo, and like who needs to be involved in the demo. Like all of this really falls on you. Like you become the quarterback of the sales process. And just like some of the challenges there are, you always just want to make sure that you have like the right people in place, like to do their job so that they can communicate, as well as possible, like to the potential client, that your team is the right team to go with.
Yeah, I think that sort of clean slate, like you mentioned, right, that you come into,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
challenge, but going back to your curiosity trait that you mentioned earlier, that's why it's so important, right? Is like you need to be somebody that is interested in learning about a new field, like you said, but also learning about what the different pieces of the puzzle are to make this sales engine, right? And being willing to sort of build the engine as you're flying, as they say, right?
I
Um,
think that I just like that is such a great way to put it, because essentially, like, to me, the difference between like being the founding AE and being just like a regular AE is that like that word founding, at least to me, means that like in the back of your head, every process you create, every cold call script you make, like in the back of your head, you're thinking, when that next account executive or those next couple account executives come in, like, will this scale perfectly for
yeah,
them? Like, will this be a tech stack that works for them? And that's where I think that whole title of like founding comes into play. Like, it's not just like an empty title. It's like you're literally setting up not only you, but in the back of your mind, like you're thinking about those other AEs that are going to eventually come in, as hopefully the company scales.
yeah. I want to dig a little bit into the tools, tech stack, and the assets and stuff like that. So when you came into your role at Pivotly, was there anything in place, or was it a completely clean slate? If there was some stuff in place, what were the sort of building blocks that you had at your disposal starting off? And then now fast forward to where you are today, what do you think were the critical tools and resources and assets that you built that are sort of like, if somebody's coming in, those are the ones that they probably want to focus on first?
100%. We had, like, when I first came in, like we had Apollo.
Okay.
That was which was kind of a mix of like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rocket Reach. Rocket
Yep.
Reach to me is like an amazing, like we just bought it. So we had Apollo, we had Gmail, like, we had Gmail, and we were really doing most of our work through Apollo. But to be honest, like this week, we just decided to go with a power dialer.
Hmm.
And I'm just like pretty blown away with like how unbelievably efficient those are. And to be honest, like thinking about the founding AE role, like what it used to be, like somebody just going one contact at a time and just like grinding through that. Um, I think that a power dialer is probably like the most valuable piece of software you can buy. I mean, like yesterday alone, I made about like 600 cold calls,
Wow.
because you're able to call five, like you load up a list, you're able to call five people at a time. And then whoever picks up, like that's who you talk to. And, I mean, you can get into like how, like how like financially beneficial that'll be for a team as they scale. And I mean, essentially, it just allows an AE to prospect so efficiently. I mean, and to do it so much. Honestly, it even kind of takes into consideration like the need for like a BDR. It's like if you're making 1,000 cold calls, like that's like having a BDR of 10, like a BDR team of 10 on like a very good day. It's like, to me, that power dialer is pretty much, it's huge. But we also have HubSpot as well, and we use Azure. We use Microsoft Azure, and we use Microsoft M365 too.
And how about assets? So, you mentioned like thinking about that next salesperson that comes in and being able to hit the ground running. So you've got the tech stack. Have you developed like demo scripts or
Yeah.
decks or assets? What are sort of the key ones that you think are important for a new founding AE to sort of prioritize, make sure they have in place so that when that next salesperson comes in, they're going to hit the ground running as well?
I mean, I think that that's just like such a good question. So, like, I mean, at the moment, like, I'll kind of take it from like just like the because like most of your job as a founding AE, and I think that this is really important, and I'm sure you'll understand it. Like, a lot of it is doing BDR work. You know, like
Yeah.
that's a large portion of it is doing outbound work. So yeah, I mean, the things that we've created, like I feel like I've created a pretty good cold call script. When it comes to the discovery calls, you know, like interestingly enough, I was actually just talking to my boss about this, and it's that like the product that we're selling right now, it's so technically complex that it seems like one of the issues that that like the sales team is like trying to combat right now is that like we ask all these questions and we can get that person like to a demo because like we're looking for that entry point of like where can Pivotly solve like that one integration problem that is like really like slowing everything down. So we find that, right? And then we take them to a demo. And then when they see a demo, they're like, oh my God, like I could also do like this, and this. And to me, like that's amazing, right? And it's like a huge credit to like the technical team and like what we're building. But at the same time, like sometimes I just kind of wonder, I'm like, I wonder if I could just ask like better discovery questions, like so that they could visualize that like before they go to a demo,
Mm.
so that they could be even more excited to go to that demo. And that will like, you know, obviously cut down on like no shows and being ghosted. So for me, like I like the cold calling script is like pretty good. But when it comes to discovery for a very technically like in-depth product, like that's something that I feel like is just like it's going to take us a bit of time. But like we're on our way there.
Awesome. And you mentioned obviously outbound is a big part of the role. And I think, like you said, for a founding AE role, that's going to be the case, right? You're creating your own market, right? And
Yeah.
you're sort of building from the ground up. And you mentioned actually cold calling, right? Is an important motion, which I found interesting because I'm finding, you know, people are saying that people don't answer calls anymore, and they're trying to use LinkedIn and email even is more challenging than it used to be. Uh, so it's interesting to hear that that's really working for you, and the
I mean,
tooling is really interesting as well.
yeah, what I would say, what I would say is this is that like it's like some of the I'll give like a little context to that. Number one, like we also do use LinkedIn as well. We use something called Tripify. So we've been able to like send LinkedIn messages, and that
Oh
has
yeah,
been that's been a pretty successful tool as well. But yeah, like for the cold calling, like a lot of the people that we've gone to a few like in-person conferences, we've gotten lists from those conferences. So like it's kind of been like semi-warm calling, I would call it, because I've
yeah.
been able to say like, hey, like I went to a conference. But having said that, like I've also loaded up some other cold call lists too. And yeah, like that has been like decently successful. I mean, what makes it really successful is that like with something like a power dialer, like you're not spending all day. Like you could do about 600 calls in like an hour, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like if you can get two connects in an hour, like that's pretty awesome.
Any other motions that have worked for you really well? Like it sounds like events and then using that as a way of warming up the outreach has worked. There's some LinkedIn there. Anything else that maybe might be unusual for somebody here? A good sort of tip or trick that they're maybe not thinking about?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, to be honest, like I think that like if you're going to be a founding AE, like you should really look forward to going into rooms, be it like virtual or physical rooms, and like which people are talking. Like that's like
Yeah.
a very important part. And you should like show up to that room, and obviously it'll be some sort of like tech networking conference or whatever it is, and you know, some of them are fun. I mean, you know, like some of them, like you go and it's in like a bar and people are like pitching their product and like that part should definitely like excite you. And I don't know, you know, again, I guess it kind of goes back a little bit to that like curiosity thing, like being curious about like what people are building, and being curious about just like what sort of problems they're facing in their building process. Like the tips and tricks that I have of being a founding AE is like learn your product, like learn how your product could be beneficial, try to be in person as much as you possibly can. And to be honest, like going back to that, like in the early days, like just to give like a little bit more context to Pivly, like we acquired a custom dev shop. So as we were trying to answer the most important question, which is like, what could you sell today? And when Pivotly wasn't like fully ready, we had a service like a custom dev shop that was ready to go. So for me, like when I was in New York, I mean, I was out almost every night, and it could be fun. Like you go, like you can grab a drink, you can grab a cocktail, and just if you see 100 people in the bar, like try to chat with 90 of them, ask a bunch of questions and see if it works. But yeah, to me, like a couple sales hacks are just going to where people are. Trying to grab their cell phone is huge. Like if you can grab their, like you want them to feel very comfortable with the fact that you're a small team. Part of that is grabbing their cell phone number and then making sure that if this is not a time to play like hard to get. It's like if they text you, text back immediately. Like it is not like I'll get them tomorrow. It's like make them feel like they're part of your, I know it's not like family, company, however you want to put it. Like you really want to make that feeling very like make sure that they know that they're being prioritized.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really great points. The in person these days is so important, especially with our
Huge.
remote world, and it makes that cold outreach a warm follow up instead, which is really important. And then show what makes you different as an agile startup, right? Like the quick follow up, make them feel like they're your only
And
customer and they're important. I think those are all the traits that are any founding AE could benefit from. You mentioned curiosity a couple of times, as maybe like a soft skill that is really important. One thing that I think doesn't get talked about enough in this sort of founding AE, but also just startup culture in general is the mental side of this game, right?
yeah,
Um, and I
yeah.
know you come from a golf background, so like you have some training on that front as well. But tell me a little bit about how you think about the mental side. Obviously there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be days where you're making great connects and you're booking demos. There's going to be days where
Yeah.
none of those calls are going to be answered and you're going to hit voicemails. How do you go through that up and down roller coaster motion of founding AE?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that like having a deep golf background like is just it's just one of those sports that like and I like to surf as well. I'm not great at it, but like I'm okay at it. And it's like just kind of doing those like individual sports that are incredibly difficult but also super rewarding. I think like very uniquely prepare you for a role like this because like you know how hard something like this is, but then you also know how good it feels when you get that like small win. So yeah, I mean just like a couple like tips and tricks to that is that like I try to exercise a lot. I try to eat healthy like a lot. And I think that like if you do those things, at least for me personally, like those things help me as I'm trying to just sort of like keep my temper because you hear no a lot and you hear no a lot when you expect to hear. Even when you expect to hear yes, you could still hear no a lot. So yeah, just trying to keep the mind clear is really hard, but it's very important.
You shared some awesome advice here today, a lot of tactics and stuff like that. Kind of to round out this conversation, if you were to sort of talk to yourself, when you were starting out in this role and give yourself advice, what would be sort of the high level advice you'd give to best prepare you for what's ahead?
Yeah, no problem. I think that just like being patient in a role like this there's two things. Like one is to just be patient. Like every salesperson just wants to like go into their company and just like let it be known that like look, like you guys can count on me. Like I'm the man here, like I'm gonna bring in the revenue. I'm gonna bring this team to like a series A, series B, series C, but like it never happens that quickly because selling as much as like a sales leader doesn't want to like explicitly say it like a sales leader I mean I'm sorry like a sales cycle there's just a lot of things that are out of the seller's control. Like it's just the way it is. So a lot of sales deals move closer, especially when you're on a smaller team and you can't just give like, hey, 5 competitors in your area are using this, like you want to use us. Like it's just going to take a little bit more time. I think the other piece of advice that I think is just super important is that like you should just really always be trying to gain like the trust of your team. And I think that for me, like in this, like I've always tried to do that, but in a role like this, if you're the founding AE, there's probably like 5 or 6 of you. And you really just want to like over articulate what you're doing all the time. Is
Mm.
that it's like if you're going to an event, like let everybody know you're going to an event. If you booked a meeting, like let everybody know you booked a meeting. Like everybody knows that this will not exist unless the sales are coming in. So like always trying to gain the trust of not only like the person that you report to, but just like the team as a whole. I think is just something that should be prioritized. And it just goes with that like constant communication, just always let people know that like you're working, let people know that like, look, I'm trying different things here. And I think that if everybody trusts one another, like they don't have to like love or like each other. I just think that if everybody trusts that the other person is doing what they can to like advance the company, you're gonna do great.
Awesome, Ben. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and walking us through your journey here. It's been really insightful. Lots of great tactics, tools, and soft skill advice. Is if folks want to connect with you, if there's somebody that's just starting out in the role and maybe they're selling to a similar vertical, or something that you said resonated with them and they want to learn more, where's the best place to find you? And also, if folks want to learn about Pivotly, if that sounded interesting to them, where's the best place for them to learn about
Yeah, no problem.
Pivotly?
I'm on LinkedIn all the time. Like I essentially like live on LinkedIn. So if you write to me, like I will write back to you in 2 seconds. Yeah, my name on LinkedIn, it's Ben Sklar. There's founding AE at Pivotly. And yeah, if you want to learn a little bit more about like Pivotly without talking to me, you can go to pivotly.com. But it'd be great if you did want to talk to me because I could talk to you about all the benefits of Pivotly. So yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be there to answer.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thanks again and have a great day over there.
100%. It was Justin. Thanks so much for piecing this together. It was a blast. Have a good one.